This is a Revolution Truth podcast. Truth-telling in war. What it means to be a military whistleblower. With Ethan McCord and Michael Prysner. Hosted by Jeff Paterson.
Welcome to the Truth-telling in War Military Whistleblower panel. I'll be your host today. My name is Jeff Paterson. I'm stepping in for Tangerine, who's facing some health issues, and Revolution Truth has asked me to replace her as host today. Revolution Truth is an international all-volunteer organization dedicated to truth-telling and the restoration of legitimate democracies and civil liberties. The group conducts campaigns in defense of whistleblowers and whistleblowing platforms. It's part of the coalition that is suing the U.S. government over the National Defense Authorization Act, and it's building an alternative media platform primarily through these panels. Today's panel discussion is a number one of two of the organization's Empire series. Revolution Truth hosts 3 different series of panels, including Occupy, Empire, and Global Spring. The latter are a series of conversations between Middle Eastern and Western activists and revolutionaries. The Empire series began with lessons from WikiLeaks and an opening conversation about the development of multiple cyber whistleblowing platforms. Today's conversation is a natural extension of that discussion. Joining us are 2 military whistleblowers who dare to come forward to give us the truth about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we're happy to have them both. The first, Michael Prysner, is a U.S. Army veteran that served in Iraq. He's the co-founder of the March Forward organization and is a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I know Michael's been involved with the Occupy movement and was arrested at Occupy Los Angeles in November 2012. I'm wondering, Michael, if you could tell us a little bit more about what you're doing today, Revolution Truth, and how you became an activist and an organizer.
Sure. Well, I guess how I became an activist and organizer is, a bit of a long story. But to make a long story short, I was deployed to Iraq as a part of the initial invasion in March of 2003. And actually, this day, 9 years ago, I was sitting on an airfield in Italy, waiting to be in one of the first planes, or the first plane that landed in the north of the country in the invasion in 2003. And at that time, at the beginning of the war, we were so inundated with all of these lies about what the war was for. I mean, so many people in the United States believed, in fact, the majority believed that there was a connection between the Iraqi government and the 9/11 attacks. And the majority of the population believed that there is this indisputable evidence of weapons of mass destruction. And, many people believed, even though there is, the largest anti-war protests in world history, in fact, the largest demonstrations at all in world history against that war, there is a sentiment in the country that the facts, the so-called facts that were being pumped out were true, that if we did not bomb and invade and occupy Iraq at that moment, then there would be some devastating attack on U.S. soil. And so we went with that in our minds, that there is this immediate need to be invading that country, and also that we'd be going to give a better life to the Iraqi people, that we would be bringing them democracy, freeing them from a dictator, and all of the stuff we're taught from day one living in the United States. And, just to not to detail everything, it was my experiences, my firsthand experiences in Iraq that exposed to me that the motives for war were a complete lie. And we now know for a fact that they were lies. When the politicians and generals were repeating them over and over again, and the media talking heads, they knew that they were lying when they were telling the American public that. And the biggest thing was seeing that the myth of not only defending our friends and family here at home, but the myth of helping the Iraqi people, bringing a better life to the Iraqi people, and as if that war had something to do with making their lives better or liberating them. And it was my experiences as an occupier in a country that very obviously did not want us occupying them, that my view about my role in the U.S. military was completely shattered. And this this thing that I had wanted to do my entire life, that I did the first opportunity I got, that I volunteered for, all fell apart in front of my face. And so I actually started speaking out while I was still in Iraq. Had Michael Moore actually published a letter that I wrote to him, saying that the reality of the war is not what they were telling us. And since then, I had felt compelled to do what I can to tell the truth about the war, to speak out about it, and also knowing that there were many others in the active duty military who felt the same way that I did, and I felt that it was a responsibility of those of us who had been to the war not just to be voices against it, but to be doing things to reach those who had the same thoughts, who didn't want to be a part of it, and let them know that they're not alone and there's something that they can actually do. That's why myself and many other veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan wars and actually of Vietnam and other conflicts, we formed the organization March Forward just about 2 years ago, which is a progressive soldiers and veterans organization that's against the wars, that's for progressive social change here at home, but that has the main mission today of reaching out to those who are in the military. We're in the middle of a very bloody war in Afghanistan, a war that the majority of people oppose, the majority of soldiers oppose, and so our main task today is reaching those soldiers and letting them know that if they do not want to fight in Afghanistan, that they have the absolute right to refuse their orders to go in one way or another. So that is our mission today, is be trying to, organize soldiers within the military and recent veterans to speak out about the wars and, try to strike real blows against this, against the war machine and against U.S. imperialism from inside the military.
Thanks, Michael. Our second guest today is Ethan McCord. He's actually the soldier carrying the two children in the collateral murder video released by WikiLeaks back in April 2010. In this incident, more than a dozen people were killed, including two Reuters journalists. Bradley Manning, an Army private first class, has been incarcerated since May of 2010 and is now facing life in prison for, in part, releasing this video to WikiLeaks. Ethan recounts this airstrike as pretty much an everyday military occurrence in Iraq, and that it was not an extraordinary incident. Ethan is with We Are Not Your Soldiers, a program that goes into high schools and provides them with the facts. Some would say an anti-military perspective on recruiting. Ethan is also featured in The Incident of New Baghdad, which was a short documentary nominated for a 2012 Academy Award, which I was disappointed that you didn't win, Ethan. Can you tell us a little bit more what you're up to these days and how you got involved and how you became an organizer?
Yeah, absolutely. I like Michael, felt that was, something that I wanted to do ever since I was a child. And it came from indoctrination, basically, from my childhood, G.I. Joe and Rambo and watching the movies. It was a part of my family history. Almost everybody in my family had served at one point or another in the military. So I was raised with the fact that this is our duty. So when September 11th happened, I ran out and I joined the Navy. Spent 4 years in the Navy, felt that I wasn't doing enough, and that I needed to go to the front lines, and so I switched over to the Army Infantry and was quickly deployed to Iraq in George Bush's surge of 2007. I started to kind of question some of the motives of the military when I was in basic training and we were marching to cadences that were degrading towards other human beings. Like I went to the market where all the Hajis shop, pull out a machete, and I began to chop. I started to realize that racism was pretty rampant in the military. But I still had the ideals that I was going to go over and I was going to be that soldier that, you see in the movies back in World War II that, they're thanking you for helping them and for freeing them. And so that was my mindset in going into Iraq. fairly quickly, I realized that we were not wanted in Iraq. When it became part of our mission to out-terrorize the so-called terrorists, it started to dawn on me pretty quickly that we were playing more of the role of the bad guy than the good guy. We were kicking in doors in the middle of the night and scaring children half to death and dragging their father or their military-age brother out of the house and beating him severely. As I was watching these otherwise good soldiers turning into what I would say monsters over there because of the situation that we were placed in. You know, how do you distinguish an enemy from a friend when the entire country, due to the systematic training that we went through, the entire population was deemed the enemy? There was no way to win hearts and minds of the people over there. In fact, there was a saying in my unit of 2 in the heart and 1 in the mind. So yeah, everything was pretty much on a rocker for me as far as my belief system. And then that day, July 12th, 2007, when the Apaches attacked the group of men on the corner, the Reuters photographer, and then attacked the van, you know, I came up onto the scene, and I had never seen anything quite like a group of men who had been hit by 30-millimeter rounds. And then, but inside my head, I was thinking, you know, there's no way that we as Americans can do this to these children in this van. And so I pulled the children out, and when I did that, I got berated by my platoon leader for basically, in his words, saving future terrorists. So yeah, I had a very difficult time justifying what America was doing there, let alone myself. It became extremely difficult for me to keep up with the day-to-day over there. But I was wounded in Iraq in November of 2007. I came home, was released from the Army in 2009, and when I was released from the Army, I started trying to go to the media. I had collected all these videos and pictures from the other soldiers who were huffing canned air and abusing detainees, because I knew that they were wrong, but you know, I didn't know where to go while I was in the military. So I started trying to speak with the media. The media kind of, you know, played me off as like, okay, yeah, just another crazy veteran who's got some stories. But then in April of 2010, when the video was released, that was named Collateral Murder by WikiLeaks, you know, there I was running across the screen with the children, and it's hard to say that what's going on in the video is not happening. I mean, I've been in some arguments with some other soldiers, as well as civilians, who say, "Oh, but you're not getting the whole picture." And I do get the whole picture. That is the whole picture. That is the whole picture. That is what we've been doing in Iraq. What you see is what you get. And so from there, I started speaking to the media, and my overall goal was to speak to high school students and to younger college students who were thinking of military as an option. I didn't want them to fall prey to the same lies that I did, and I kind of maintain that as my main focus today.
Well, thanks, Ethan. I want to let our listeners know that unfortunately we will not be able to take calls today. As I'm stepping in here for Tangerine, we're kind of flying by the seat here a little bit more than usual. My name is Jeff Paterson. I'm the project director of an organization, Courage to Resist, and our mission is to support U.S. military war resistors, including conscientious objectors, and people who remain in the military and face repercussions for simply speaking out. I believe Mike and Ethan are very good examples of people speaking out from within the military. One of the campaigns that we're involved with is in support of Army Private First Class Intelligence Analyst Bradley Manning. Bradley is facing life in prison for releasing the WikiLeaks video collateral murder that Ethan was just talking about, and that is possibly, I believe, one of the most historic whistleblowers of our time, and probably one of the most significant whistleblowers since Daniel Ellsberg released the Pentagon Papers during the Vietnam War. Daniel Ellsberg released thousands of top-secret documents that helped end our involvement in Vietnam. Bradley Manning is accused of releasing tens of thousands of classified and secret documents that actually helped end our involvement in the Iraq War. Because of the WikiLeaks documents, the Obama administration was not able to negotiate an extension on the Armed Forces Agreement between the U.S. and Iraq before the December 31st deadline, and basically pushed Obama's hand, and that having to, against his better judgment, declare victory in the Iraq War and bring most U.S. troops out of Iraq. Of course, we still have thousands of troops guarding a massive embassy, tens of thousands of contractors, mercenaries, but the majority of U.S. troops are back from Iraq, possibly directly related to Bradley Manning's leak to WikiLeaks. Courage to Resist supports many different types of war resistors, and they all have an individual, unique story. We are on the phone here with Ethan McCord, Mike Prysner, both with their own individual stories. We've heard a little bit about that. I want to give you, Mike, another opportunity to sort of lay out, what was it that made you join the military? What was that transformation that you went through to eventually speaking out? And what were the repercussions for doing so? It's not easy. And I'm curious myself if you could just get into that a little bit more.
Sure. Well, I joined the military. All the factors that push most people into the military were factors for me. Getting a college education or being able to pay for a college education, getting a job training and a job skill that would be useful in the job market to be able to have a career and have a family and those sorts of things. Those things that are increasingly unavailable and unattainable for large sectors of the population, and especially large sectors of young people coming out of high school. So these things were a push factor for me, but I think when joining the military, because like Ethan, it was something I'd wanted to do since I was playing with G.I. Joes. So it was, the number one reason for me was, really believing that if I was a soldier in the U.S. Army, that I'd be this force for good in the world. That if I was to be sent to war, that it would be for just reasons, that we'd be helping people, freeing the oppressed, and getting rid of the bad guys in the world. Which is a very simplistic view, but that's what I had at 17 years old when I enlisted in the Army, and I actually left for basic training on my 18th birthday, with all of these ideals in my heart and feeling very strongly about them, which is why when the Iraq War was starting and we knew that people were going to be deploying for the invasion, I essentially did everything I could to get on the deployment going to Iraq because, I believe that the Iraqi people wanted the U.S. to overthrow Saddam. I believed that that was one of the missions of the Iraq War, was to, this idea of humanitarian intervention, which we understand today to be a complete fallacy and something that cannot exist on behalf of the U.S. empire. But as a 19-year-old young man, I bought into this idea, and so I really wanted to go because I felt, we'd be greeted with flowers, and like Ethan said, like in the old World War II movies, where the population is greeting you and smiling and happy that you've come in and liberated them. So that's what led me into the military, was this sense of patriotism and this sense of serving a greater good in the world. And of course, a sense of, serving a greater good in the world are ideals that I still have, but I realized that, those are expressed by fighting against the U.S. government, not on behalf of the U.S. government. But, there was, the tipping point, and I think there was a culmination of experiences that, showed me that what I thought about the war and what I thought was going to happen in the war, what we were going to do in the war, was in fact not the reality at all. And so it was a culmination of these experiences. But I would say that, the tipping point that I remember, and in fact, there's really two moments that really stand out to me as being when I understood or was thinking in my head that this is something I did not want to be a part of, that I felt like I was the bad guy. And there were incidents that involved people that made me reflect on my own family. Kicking families out of their homes for whatever reason, but one young girl that stood out to me because she looked exactly like my sister back home, who was the same age, dragging her onto the street as she's crying and arresting her family members. Another was a man who had been shot through the neck at a traffic checkpoint, and the reason he was shot is just because he left the long line to get through the checkpoint. And when we were questioning him as he's, bleeding to death and has a serious wound, asking him why he was trying to get out of the checkpoint, he just kept saying that I was just trying to go home and see my family, and just kept repeating that over and over. And so it was these two incidents that, reminded me of my father trying to get home from work to see us, and my sister, loving her family and wanting to protect her family. And those experiences made me start to think, well, these people here, they're not very much different than my own family or my own neighbors or friends. And in fact, they weren't any different at all from my family and my friends and my neighbors. And then everything I was doing there, that I was doing to these people, in my mind, I was doing these things to my family and to my friends because they became inseparable. And that was the point, when I actually identified with the Iraqi people and realized that we had so much in common and that we were no different at all. That's when I, realized that I was the one who was the bad guy, that I shouldn't be a part of this thing that was hurting these people and destroying these people's lives, because in a sense, it would be the same if I was doing that to my own family and my own neighbors, and that, if that was happening to my friends and family, that I would probably do what the Iraqi people were doing, which was resisting and resisting the foreign occupation and what was being done to them. And so it was that moment of seeing that commonality and seeing that we had common interests and a common bond and life experience that, showed me what my real role was, that I wasn't this heroic savior in the country, that I was just this thug and this tool for what I later learned to be, just a pawn to pave the way for U.S. banks and corporations to get a foothold in really, one of the most resource-rich regions of the entire world, one of the most profitable regions of the entire world. And then, I felt very betrayed by this government because I was willing to die for what they told us was just and what was right. I was willing to give up my entire life to these ideals. And so the Iraq War infuriated me because I felt I had been, and I realized I had been completely lied to and completely used as a cannon fodder for, the enrichment of this small group of very rich people. And so that's what it was that compelled me to no longer participate in the wars and try to be a force that would end them altogether.
Well, thanks. We were listening to Mike Prysner of the March Forward organization. We're also talking with Ethan McCord. Ethan, a former soldier who appears in the WikiLeaks collateral murder video, pulling two small children have been riddled with 30-round bullets from a U.S. Apache helicopter. Ethan, I'm wondering if you had anything, a similar experience to Mike. Was your experience different? Mike has a relatively atypical presentation of his military experience, certainly different than what we hear from the Veterans for Foreign Wars or anything like that. I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit about your own personal experience.
Sure. Unlike Mike, I joined for strictly patriotic reasons. I was 25 years old. The only, I didn't need money to go to college. I, in fact, had a very well-paying job as a civilian. But when September 11th happened, I felt that I could, through what the media's take of the events that happened that day, I was filled with anger and rage that anybody could do this to us, the great United States of America. Again, I'm a product of how I was raised. I was raised on Chuck Norris movies and John Wayne movies. I began hating people of Middle Eastern descent from early childhood based on like movies like Delta Force that portrayed all people of Middle Eastern descent as terrorists. So then when here's these planes crashing into the World Trade Centers, I ran out and joined strictly because I felt that I needed to be the hand of vengeance for these people who were killed that day. In fact, the rage inside me became so intolerable that I couldn't imagine myself doing anything but joining the military. So I ran out and joined, and for the first 4 years of my military career, I served enthusiastically. Again, I was in the Navy, and I didn't deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan. We were more of a support. I was in Bahrain, but I felt that I had to do more. I had to do more. That I just wasn't doing enough. I wanted to be the guy kicking in the doors and shooting people in the face. And it goes back to the way that I was raised. And so I ran out and I got a conditional release from the Navy and switched over to the Army Infantry. I have numerous experiences, much like Michael's, in Iraq. As I said, I didn't immediately become against the war in Iraq because we've been trained so extensively on this hatred for the people of Iraq. I went over there and I was psyched to go over there. I wanted to go over there and I wanted to get my combat infantry badge and come home and people pat me on the back and say, hey, good job, thank you for protecting our freedoms and whatnot. And but in Iraq, I much like Michael, especially the incident of July 12th, when I looked inside that van, like he said, he'd seen his sister or his father, I actually saw my own children sitting in that van. And I couldn't, for the life of me, imagine why we would do this. And this incident was just one of many that had been happening over there, and every single time there was just like an apology. Oops, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Oops, I'm sorry. I mean, and we're still seeing that today with the Staff Sergeant Bales who committed the 16 murders in Afghanistan. You know, President Obama gets on and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry," you know, and what is this teaching our youth that we can, just because we're Americans, we can apologize and it's fine. Like, it makes everything better. It's like we wave a magic wand and because we apologized, and it doesn't matter if you want to accept it, because as long as that apology makes us feel better. And I saw that so often in Iraq. I mean, you know, the frustration of being over there, and there were no enemies for us to fight. Sure, there were a couple of guys who would come out every once in a while and fire their weapons, but again, I'm a product of the 80s. I grew up as one of my favorite movies being Red Dawn, and you know, we cheered for the Americans when the same exact thing was happening to the Americans that we were doing to the people of Iraq. And I started seeing the people of Iraq who were fighting us back because we had just did 360-degree rotational fire after an IED hit our vehicle, and we killed an old lady on the street or a young child on the playing in his yard. What would you do in that situation? I know what I'd do if someone shot my child. I'd pick up a weapon and I'd try to kill that person, or I'd try to kill anybody who looked like or represented that person. And so I started seeing the people of Iraq in the same light that I saw the Wolverines in Red Dawn in the 80s movie. So it became very difficult to continue to play this role of soldier, and you know, I started speaking out while I was in Iraq to the other soldiers. I was placed in a position of leadership, that I was weapons squad leader, and I made sure that my soldiers did not fire their weapons at people when an IED went off, unless you had positive identification that this person had a weapon and was firing at us. Because I was watching too many times that people on the street were just getting mowed down, and you know, our battalion commander was Pat Tillman's commander, and he was just gung-ho. You know, the only way that we can maintain control of our area of operations is if we out-terrorize the terrorists, if we make them more afraid of us than they are of any other repercussions. So yeah, you know, and my hardest part was my daughter sitting there saying, you know, my daddy's over there fighting the bad people. You know, how I still haven't been able to totally find a way of telling my daughter that in all actuality I was the bad person in Iraq. And when you're in Iraq and you're feeling these feelings, it's a very lonely feeling, because you have all these other soldiers who want to partake in these situations, but what we're seeing now is that a lot of these soldiers who partook in these activities and these killings, you know, they're coming home and they're committing suicide. I've had 8 friends in the last 2 years commit suicide. So it's not because we're doing great things for God and country over there. It's because we're being asked to do horrible things to innocent people. And you know, I've said this before, you cannot go to a country or anybody for that matter, you cannot kill another human being and go on about your day like nothing happened. That lives with you, it stays with you, and you know, when you run out of justifications as to why you did this, you're left alone thinking about these horrible atrocities that you committed, and I think that's what we're seeing with our soldiers committing suicide now. So yeah, I was once asked if I thought that the events of July 12, 2007 were an atrocity, and I feel that the entire occupation is an atrocity, and I will always feel that way. And I'm thankful that there are veterans out there who feel the same way I do. In fact, when I was in the military, I had no idea of who Courage to Resist was, or World Can't Wait, We Are Not Your Soldiers, or any organization like that. They do a very good job of keeping that away from us. And I think that in order to help get soldiers to somehow maintain their humanity, or to keep their moral compass while, or to help them resist deployments to these illegal wars, it would be beneficial if we could get the word out to them a lot sooner, a lot faster, and a lot harder.
Thanks, Ethan. We're listening to Truth Telling in War, Military Whistleblowers panel presented by RevolutionTruth. That was Ethan McCord, and Mike Prysner is also with us, both are Iraq War veterans. My name is Jeff Paterson. I'm the project director of Courage to Resist, and I also sit on the Bradley Manning Support Network Steering Committee. Whistleblowers in the military is something I believe fits the classic definition of what Bradley Manning is accused to have done, providing WikiLeaks with the collateral murder video that Ethan appears in, with battlefield reports from both Iraq and Afghanistan, and a trove of embarrassing U.S. State Department cables that lay bare what the U.S. is actually doing in countries around the world versus what they're saying they're doing. And from that, we know of misconduct of U.S. contractors from Afghanistan to Haiti, and we know of simple, straight-out lying to people of various countries, while the U.S. pursues an entirely different foreign policy in the interest of its own economic outcome. I was also a member of the United States Armed Forces. Unlike Ethan or Mike, I did not deploy to Iraq. In August of 1990, I was actually the first service member to refuse to deploy to Iraq. At that time, we were just beginning with our Desert Shield, which quickly became Desert Storm. Like Ethan and Mike, I also joined because I had watched Red Dawn one too many times. Top Gun was also exciting. And I also have a little bit of Sylvester Stallone, Rambo, running through my mind when I joined the Marine Corps versus the Army or the Coast Guard or something like that. As a member of the Bradley Manning Support Network, I'm trying to go out and build a grassroots campaign to defend who I believe is one of the historic whistleblowers of our time, Bradley Manning. And we faced an uphill battle. But because of Ethan speaking out, and because of people like Daniel Ellsberg speaking out, I really do believe Bradley Manning has a fighting chance. If we can create a real grassroots effort to represent both inside and outside of the courtroom, as his hearings move forward at Fort Meade, Maryland, to a possible court-martial later this year. Michael, I know I've seen a photo of you and a Bradley Manning banner. I was hoping you could talk about why you care about Bradley's case from your perspective as an organizer with the March Forward organization.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, the day that Bradley Manning's pretrial hearing began, I know there was coordinated action all across the country organized by the Bradley Manning Support Network and Courage to Resist and other supporting organizations. And, we had a good number of members here in Los Angeles, and we wanted to do something to mark that day, too, to show support. And so we made a giant, 60-foot banner that said "Free Bradley Manning." And all of us were mostly veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, took that to the famous Los Angeles highway system, which is thousands of cars backed up in traffic for hours on end, and dropped this massive banner. And so that day, thousands of people saw that there were soldiers supporting Bradley Manning in his trial and trying to raise awareness about him as a figure and what he did. And the reason that we support Bradley Manning, if he did, in fact, leak this classified information, is because if that's the case, if that's what he did, then he did something very significant and very important, because what he did, quite simply, was tell us the truth, or show us the truth about the wars, about what was happening, about what the government was saying behind closed doors, because everything that we had gotten from our so-called representatives in Washington, from those Pentagon generals, from immediately with the 9/11 attacks up until present day, we get nothing but lies. I mean, there's no question. I mean, what they are telling us, what they're telling the media, what they're releasing in their statements, they're flat-out lies. And they're lies that are being told because they know that if they told the truth about the wars, if they told the truth about the real reason we're trying to maintain a presence in Iraq, if they told us the real reason why they want us to fight endlessly in Afghanistan, if they told us the real reason why they want to attack Iran and overthrow the government in Syria and attack places like Cuba and Venezuela and North Korea, if they told the truth about the real motives behind all of that, then the vast majority of people in the United States would oppose it, even though they already do oppose the wars, but they would oppose it in such a way, realizing that so much death and destruction and loss of life from our own friends and family and our sisters and brothers abroad would, revolt against it, essentially, because it's such an atrocious crime that's being committed in our name. And so receiving nothing but lies from the powers that be, it takes actions like this to get the truth to be able to come out. It takes people becoming whistleblowers and telling the truth about the reality inside, because their bosses, the people sitting up top who want them to be quiet and who want us to be quiet, those are the real criminals. Those are the true criminals. Those are the ones that are destroying millions upon millions of lives for no other purpose than the enrichment of some very, very rich people and for the expansion of those interests around the world. And so that's why Bradley Manning, it's so absurd that he is in jail and so absurd that he is facing a harsh sentence because, all he did was expose actual criminals for carrying out the current wars and lying about the wars so that people continue to go along with them. The people that should be in jail are the Bush administration officials and all those involved in subsequent administration who are continuing these wars that have taken the lives and destroyed the lives of millions of people.
Mm-hmm. So, and Ethan McCord is on the line. Ethan is actually in the collateral order video that Bradley Manning allegedly leaked to WikiLeaks. So, Ethan, your relationship with Bradley is a little bit more personal and yet very indirect.
Right.
What can you say about this sort of historical accident you found yourself here?
Yeah, well, I've been following the case since April 5th, 2010, when the video was released and I saw myself running across the screen. But I've read the chat logs of Bradley Manning and was mentioned a few times in them. If my whole reasoning of standing behind Bradley Manning is that if Bradley Manning actually did what he's being accused of doing, then Bradley Manning is the example and the shining light and the golden rule of what America should be. He has shown through his actions that he has more righteousness and the true American spirit, or just the spirit of humanity, in his little finger than all of Capitol Hill does. And I cannot not stand behind him. I only wish that I had the same amount of courage that this hero did while I was serving in the military. So yeah, I have to stand behind him for my children's sake, for my grandchildren's sake, because if we don't stand behind Bradley Manning, then our freedoms are gone. And you know, America that we were raised to supposedly love and to know as right is so wrong on so many levels. And you know, I cannot see myself not standing behind him, and I will stand behind him to the end.
Thanks, Ethan. I know that the Bradley Manning Support Network is calling for international solidarity actions coming up during Bradley's next hearing at Fort Meade, and that is Tuesday, April 24th through April 26th. I really do encourage people to visit bradleymanning.org to host an event, to attend an event, or become an organizer with the international defense effort to support Bradley Manning. Again, a classic whistleblower in every sense of the word, and that is not something that even the prosecution is trying to deny here in this case. Michael, I was wondering if you could talk about what you think is the best way to support current and future whistleblowers, and what would you say to somebody who knows they should speak out but are simply afraid of the repercussions?
Well, that's a great question, and I would say that right now there is no shortage of individuals inside the U.S. military who are questioning what they're a part of, whose mission that they've been a part of or are potentially going to be a part of is coming into conflict with their own conscience and with their own morals. Soldiers who see no reason why they have to go die in Afghanistan or go kill someone in Afghanistan, or Iran or Iraq or anywhere else. So I would say that there's a high degree in the military of people not wanting to be a part of these wars and not believing that their government is telling them the truth, not believing that those millionaire politicians who are saying that, you know, we support the troops, go 20 times to Afghanistan, they don't want to get their legs blown off for those people. And they're seeing the reality that the war isn't helping anyone, that it's a crime against the people that they're occupying, or that, you know, they're seeing lives being destroyed for something that they don't agree with. I think that those people are pretty much everywhere inside the U.S. military, people who would be inspired and motivated to speak out, to become whistleblowers, to become forces against the war. But the thing is reaching those people. If those people think that they're alone, that they're the only ones that are thinking that way, that they're isolated and alienated, then for the most part, they won't speak out. I mean, I didn't really speak out when I was still in the military because I felt that way. Bradley Manning did. I mean, and that's why he's such a hero. But the way that we can inspire and encourage others to do the things that other soldiers have done, that have been historic acts that have really exposed and hurt the war effort, is finding new ways and supporting organizations that are doing the work of trying to reach those soldiers inside the military. People can go to marchforward.org and see our website, because we're trying to do just that. I mean, we are trying to look for new ways to reach people inside the military. When we reach people inside the military, or when they get in touch with us, we help them organize in their own units, distribute literature in their own units, and finding new and unique ways to reach all of these people who we know would want to be a part of the movement against the wars if they only knew that that movement existed. And so it's all about raising awareness and helping those who are raising awareness to be able to take that work to the next level.
Ethan, I was wondering if you had your own personal take on that, and also if you wanted to speak to what was it like. I was a Marine for 4 years. I served with the same Marine unit for 3 of those years. And I know when I spoke out, it was very divisive. Some of my long-term buddies, would never speak to me again, and I made new friends as well, though. What do you think about whistleblowing? What's it really take to encourage that? What are the obstacles? And what were sort of the repercussions that you faced with the members of your Army unit?
Right. Well, one of the major obstacles that I think we have to overcome is the training that the soldiers receive in basic training. I know this. Every soldier has been told this. If you're a civilian, you don't have any right to speak. And so what we need to do is we need to bypass that frame of mind by having other soldiers who are active duty speaking to soldiers. Because civilians can go to bases and pass out literature all day and all night, but until there's other soldiers saying, no, seriously, you need to look at this. This is good stuff. You really need to pay attention. Then we're not really getting anywhere, because soldiers have the mindset, and I'm sure you witnessed this as well in the Marine Corps back in the 90s. If you're not a Marine, don't talk to me. It was the same mindset in the infantry. So we have to find a way to bypass that. And I do know for a fact that March Forward is actually able to get into the barracks and have soldiers speaking to other soldiers. And I think that's what's so important about having the veterans who are coming out and speaking, is because, I, for one, had no idea about Courage to Resist or any of the other organizations who are there to help you when you're feeling so alone that you're the only one feeling these, having these thoughts. So yeah, I definitely think that more visibility is a must for this movement to take place. And let's be honest, my personal feeling is that 10 soldiers, active duty soldiers, who have the same thoughts that we do and the same beliefs and the same wants and desires as us, is worth more than 100 civilians in my eyes, because they're the ones who are actually being sent to these wars. And if we have them refusing to fight and refusing to take these illegal orders and execute them, then the battle's being won already. So we need to get to the soldiers, and we need to let them know that there are the support systems, there are the support groups out there. There's thousands upon thousands of soldiers and veterans who feel the same exact way that they do, and they're not alone, and that they have people who are going to stand beside them when they're standing up in front of their platoon and saying, I refuse to do this. And that's one of the things that I saw when I was in, and I began to speak out, and I had some soldiers underneath me, and you guys have heard of Josh Stever, who was with me, and he wrote the letter of reconciliation and responsibility to the people of Iraq right along with me, and he was one of my soldiers. Another soldier who spoke out about what happened was Ray Corcolas, who is another one of my soldiers. It's word of mouth. It's getting up there and saying, look, man, let's seriously think about this. Yeah, these guys over here acting like frat boys and having a good time. that's not a good time, and you know it. And you're the one who is sitting in your room at night questioning, and let's discuss this like civilized individuals. And yeah, definitely word of mouth from other soldiers. I mean, it goes along very quickly. And sure, yeah, I lost some friends who I thought, were great friends of mine who would have been lifelong brothers. In fact, one of them is a godfather to my son, and that relationship's gone. But you know what? For every single negative individual who's coming after me or saying that we're wrong, there's 100 positives. And as long as that positive remains, then we can continue to grow.
Thanks, Ethan. President Obama won the election among many other promises. He promised to be the most transparent president, the most transparent administration in the history of our country, or at least in the last decade. But the fact is, the Obama administration has charged more people under the Espionage Act than all other presidents combined. If you look at the U.S. Court of Appeals, they have ruled against whistleblowers 125 out of 127 times since 1994. So things, we were promised change, and we've gotten more of the same, if not worse. I was wondering, Michael, if you wanted to talk a little bit in the last few minutes that we have, the Obama administration, disappointment or exactly what you expected?
Well, I think President Obama is a disappointment to many millions of people who supported him for the right reasons, because they believed that he was going to be some kind of change from the politics of the Bush administration, which were characterized by, bowing to the interests of the rich and carrying out policies that were unpopular with the people of the United States just to expand the reach of, big corporations and banks around the world, waging war for those purposes. And so, people were rightfully hopeful and rightfully supportive. And so those people, of course, are disappointed seeing that the things that they hoped and believed would change turned out to be just empty rhetoric. For myself, I was not surprised because, I learned long ago, well, not too much long ago, but after being in the military and while I was in the military and trying to figure out what caused the Iraq War. I mean, right when I got home, I kind of obsessively wanted to search for why we went, what was the real reason that we went. And it was around the time that Kerry was running against Bush's re-election. And so, there's this tendency to just be pointing the finger at the Republican Party and at the Bush administration. And we're seeing that happen now, of course, saying, the Republicans are the reason that Obama can't get anything done, even though, the first 2 years of Obama's presidency had a filibuster-proof majority and majority Democrats in the House and Senate. But the reality is that it doesn't matter which party is in power. They're both parties that represent the same interests, that represent the interests of the rich, the interests of Wall Street, the interests of big oil. And so it doesn't really matter who's sitting in the seat of the presidency because they have the same job description regardless of what party they're a part of. And so to the people that had faith in him and were disappointed in him, what I say to that is change is never going to come from the ballot box. It's never going to come from some establishment politician who's promising this or that. Change always comes, and history teaches us this, through a people struggle in the streets. And so that's how we're going to get any kind of change if we want to see it today.
And Ethan, what's your take on the Obama administration? Disappointment, what's to be expected? And again, how do you see the people restoring real transparency, real democracy to our republic?
Well, I like Michael. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't surprised. I learned in Iraq that it's the policymakers and that cause the wars and I listened to Obama with his change rhetoric and knowing deep down inside the politicians are not the ones who are going to make the change. It is us, the people of the United States, who are going to make the change, and not the politicians. So, no, I wasn't shocked. I wasn't surprised. I maybe a little disappointed. Just the simple fact that, man, this has been going on for just so long, and it needs to end. And I just want it to end, and I want somebody to be able to step up and say, okay, we're done. This is over, and you know, we're ending the wars. You know, this is ridiculous. And so I don't want to say that the outlook is bleak, but I don't have any high hopes of any politician stepping up to the plate for that one. And you know, I don't know. I'm not an extremely political person, I guess, and it goes with me being in the military. You know, politics wasn't our place. You know, you do what you're told, and so I never looked into it until I got out of the Army, and now I'm starting to become a little bit more political. And yeah, no, I wasn't shocked. I wasn't surprised with Obama, and the only way that we're going to move forward as a country is if all of us stand up and say, no more, we're not going to take it, and we make the change ourselves.
Well, Michael Prysner of March Forward, Ethan McCord, both of you I know are involved with Iraq Veterans Against the War, IVAW.org. Thank you for being part of the Truth Telling in War, the Military Whistleblowers panel presented by RevolutionTruth today. My name is Jeff Paterson with Courage to Resist and the Bradley Manning Support Network. For more information about Bradley Manning, the accused WikiLeaks whistleblower, bradleymanning.org, and visit RevolutionTruth at revolutiontruth.org/live for places to go for more information about whistleblowers, protections for whistleblowers, and how to report wrongdoing. That's revolutiontruth.org/live. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.